Craft cocktails, from the classics to zero-proof drinks, are all around us. But what if we told you that craft cocktails are actually a relatively recent addition to the culinary scene? My name is Toni Tipton-Martin, and I'm the editor-in-chief of Cook's Country at America's Test Kitchen. I want to introduce you to a podcast mini-series I'm hosting called 100 Proof, The Journey of the American Cocktail. Over 6 episodes, we'll look at how mixed drinks offer us a window into what was happening in America during the dawn of the cocktail. We'll then take you to the present day to contemplate what forces led to our modern cocktail renaissance. And along the way, we'll of course be sharing cocktail recipes with you. Subscribe to Proof from America's Test Kitchen so you won't miss the first episode. It drops on Thursday, May 23rd. Again, that's Proof, Proof, from America's Test Kitchen. Cheers.
You're listening to Heritage Radio Network.
This is really the experience that I needed. There's so many aspects to telling a story and really listening to other podcasts, listening to how other people tell stories. Of course, you're going to have your own voice, but when it comes to anything, there's formulas that work.
Welcome to another episode of Behind the Internship. I'm your host, Taylor Early, the Education Programs Coordinator here at HRN. We're taking you backstage at our Research and Radio Internship program with Danielle Flitter, Addison Austin-Lou, and Sophia Hooper, 3 interns from our spring 2024 cohort. They're revealing what it takes to become an audio producer and make HRN's flagship show Meet in 3. As you heard in our previous episode, this is a big year for the Research and Radio Internship program. For the first time, instead of immediately launching new interns into podcast production, we're starting them off with a training sprint, which comes with a lot of listening, and more listening, like Danielle mentioned at the top of this episode. If interns are going to be able to hone and cultivate their voice as a tool, they've got to be able to interact with it without feeling self-conscious. And a great way to do that is to listen to lots and lots of podcasts, among other things.
Meet in 3.
Meet in 3.
Meet and 3.
1 meat, 3 sides.
Food, news, and storytelling.
A square meal for your ears.
Meet and 3.
Our interns are going through a multi-pronged, multi-layered, multi-week training process towards production of our show Meet in 3. Yep, that's me. I've recorded some reflections throughout the redevelopment of this internship as well as throughout it, which you'll keep hearing on this show.
My name is Matt Patterson.
And that's Matt Patterson. Matt, H. Conley, and I make up the multitude of prongs in the training sprint. For the first 6 weeks of the internship program, H and I co-teach journalism and storytelling, and Matt teaches audio production. This intense training period is designed to give the interns solid foundational skills in both the storytelling and technical sides of working with audio. With this under their belts, they're ready to hit the ground running with a full-fledged production of Meet in 3 later on. Interns come to the program with a lot of story ideas for Meet in 3, which is not only inspiring to work with, it really makes my job as a host and producer easy. A great story starts with an idea. That is just the beginning of a much larger process.
Wavelengths on different tracks. And now you're starting to see it's getting a little more complicated, but you're still seeing similar things. You've got those different bars, right? That was what I was calling a track. So to be different separated sounds. And just as like a fundamental concept, why would we want to have different sounds on different tracks?
Matt makes sure the interns have the technical know-how to get their ideas on the airwaves while also making them sound good in your headphones.
We meet once a week to talk about the technical side of recording audio. We talk about remote recording, studio recordings, and then how to add music and add sound effects and edit your dialogue and all that good stuff to go from not knowing anything to being able to make full pieces.
One of the first assignments for the interns is meant to get them comfortable working in a DAW, or DAW, which they'll be doing a lot of. But Matt, what's a DAW?
In layman's terms, that is software for recording and editing audio.
Yep. A digital audio workstation helps turn raw audio into a polished production. There are a lot of DAWs on the market: Audacity, Logic Pro, Audition. The list is long and growing. HRN's software of choice is Reaper. It's cost-effective for us as a nonprofit and pretty user-friendly after a little bit of practice. Since you can't produce a podcast at HRN without working in a DAW, the intern's very first assignment is to dive into Reaper and create what's called a rough cut. A rough cut is basically putting together the voiceover that they've recorded and their selected clips to match the script that's been created for their story. This is the rough draft, so to speak, and it happens before the engineers fine-tune transitions between the audio files, also known as stems, and smoothing out the levels, or the volume and relative quality of those stems, so that it hits your ears just right. Danielle Flitter explains their assignment a little bit more.
The assignment today is basically we have two audios, the host speaking and then the interview, and we have to sync them in to match the transcript. So there's different elements of cutting the clip down to just the pieces that you need and then aligning them in time so that it flows as the conversation that you wanted to say.
While this exercise teaches interns critical technical skills, they're also seeing in real time that rough cutting is an important part of the storytelling process. Trimming and arranging audio forms the backbone of the story. They just have to learn how to actually do that in a DAW first.
I was reminded why I've given up on these softwares so many times, because it gets to this technical part and I just freeze like a deer in the headlights. I stop because I'm I don't know what to do.
Danielle's reaction is very normal. In the beginning, DAWs can seem overwhelming. They're powerful programs with a lot of options to control and fine-tune audio. Our ongoing audio production classes in the internship are designed to get everyone comfortable behind the proverbial wheel. After the second audio production session, Danielle was feeling better.
The environment here is very supportive, and because it's homework, I can't give up. Some things that I learned were clarified or little technical things. Matt is super helpful, calm and resourceful, and also just the way the class is, I feel very safe to just say, I don't know what I'm doing and participate accordingly. But it's been really helpful to just have these courses and then have the guidance along the way.
And with that guidance, Danielle completed the first assignment.
First audio editing ever complete. We're making progress.
Addison shared in the last episode that she was nervous about the technical aspect of working with audio. But when it came to this first exercise, she encountered only a few bumps.
I actually just finished, very proudly, but a little tentatively, my first rough cut exercise. Everything was going really smoothly until the very end when I needed to make sure I was rendering things appropriately. I'm admittedly a touch tech-averse, so when I'm on the computer for the purposes of a creative project, I can get that done. And then when the nitty-gritty techie details come in at the end, I have a bit of a learning curve, but I like to think I can pick things up pretty easily. It was a fun project, and I am loving the way that they've set up our classes for this internship. It feels very supported, and they're not throwing us in with the sharks.
While the assignment presented Danielle and Addison with a few challenges, it had Sophia thinking about a potential future in audio editing.
I have definitely found myself really enjoying the tiny exercises we've had to do. It's come really easily to me. I like it. I think it's really fun. It's making me think that I should explore that maybe outside of this or in addition to Meet and Three. I don't know what other opportunities there are for someone who's so baby at audio editing, but it's definitely something to note.
With their first task complete, it was time for the intern's next assignment, this time on the journalism and storytelling side of things.
In the storytelling part of their education, they are focusing on a poll, which is selecting a story or an episode that has previously gone to air and repackaging it using their lens and the angle that they find interesting.
Not only do the interns need to add their own spin to the tape they select from this previously aired story, they also have to make it all fit in to a 3-minute story, which is the average length of a story that's not the meat in an episode. A side, if you will. Addison fills you in.
We're working on a best of Meet and 3 episode, so all of the interns are pulling stories that they think are best of and creating both host VO and interviewer VO around this story.
So, you know what a DAW is, you now know what a rough cut is, and also what polls are. But what about VO? VO, or voiceover, is what you're listening to right now. It's me talking to you, tying this whole episode together. H explains.
somebody has done an interview and they are selecting the choicest bites, the juiciest morsels of the interview, then writing around them to say, like, here's this expert, here's something they said, here's what that means, so that, you know, all of the sorts of facts and stuff about a story that, you know, somebody when they're talking might say in a very long roundabout way, the way that I am going very long and roundabout in explaining this. The key with voiceover is to say it efficiently and directly in an engaging and interesting way that sounds natural, that doesn't sound like you're reading it off a script, and that sounds like your voice.
All right. Well, now that we're all making assessments about how this particular VO sounds, let's get back into what the interns are doing. Addison chose to create her poll from episode 105 of Meat and 3, called Planting the Seed, Time Travel, Shortages, and Heirloom Crops.
I chose an episode that's based around the Cherokee Nation and their revitalization of heirloom seeds, most of which were lost during the Trail of Tears. So that's particularly interesting to me in terms of food sovereignty and protection of heritage foodways. Great original story. I'm very excited to have the opportunity to kind of edit my way and take a new angle. And the angle I'm sort of trying to take anyway is that there are very specific ways and very specific things that allow cultures to self-identify. One of those things being food. And what happens when those things are lost?
Loss and identity were also key components in Danielle's choice for a poll, echoing themes of her master's thesis.
I just finished listening to the episode 147 called Food and Religion from the Garden of Eden to the Legacy of Gefilte Fish. It reminded me of my thesis where I discussed my Jewish identity as a vegetarian, initially feeling compromised because I was no longer eating the kind of cultural and traditional foods of the food culture. And so the revival of this, not just concept, but of this reality, I think will be really interesting space for me to explore and kind of address these topics that I first was interested in. And I think that might be a good angle for me to get started to clearing some of the ideas, is starting back to the origin. Start with myself, my own identity.
Sophia relates to her story on a personal level too. She chose to create her poll from a piece that H produced in episode 48 of Meat and 3, called Finding Joy in Your Kitchen.
I picked my episode. It's a story about making ricotta and the joy we find in making things for ourselves at home, which is definitely something that I relate to. I make a lot of pickles. I help my mom make sourdough. I like going the extra mile. And there was a time in college where I had like my grocery budget and like little bit of fun money budget. And those kind of became the same thing because cooking was my hobby.
Now, picking an episode to pull from is just the first hurdle of the assignment. When putting together a 3-minute poll, a lot of thought goes into how to communicate a complete idea in 180 seconds. After initially thinking she would incorporate ideas from her master's thesis, Danielle contemplates a different approach.
I've been thinking a lot about preparing for this poll episode. And so this one is supposed to have a bit of reflection to introduce us. Growing up in a Jewish family was very formative in my life. In the episode, they talk about Ashkenazi food and how a lot of Jewish American food has roots in Ashkenazi food. And then how the deli was a point of community, as well as a lot of that deli food, like those big meat sandwiches. I just kept having this visual of when my grandma would make your own deli dinner, and she would set the table with like the rye bread on the table, plates with different meats, different cheeses, tomatoes, Golden's mustard always, mayonnaise, pickles, chips. So I've been thinking about the pull. There's something about that visual that I would like to audibly tie in that I'm not really sure how to do it yet.
While Danielle contemplates the pull assignment at a personal level, Sophia flat out grapples with it from a high altitude viewpoint.
I am really, really struggling with the structure. I'm like super loath to cut down H's beautiful 4-minute love letter to ricotta. It just sounds good as is. And I don't think it needs anything else, let alone my addition. But we're working on it. There's like a couple of big ideas that might be too big for the piece. Well, the first one is the idea of the piece. It's that food is hard on the environment, hard on our bodies. It is tied to all major issues that you can think of across the globe and also like on a small scale. It's a brutal industry to work in a lot of ways. But like we're here because we love it, or many of us are here because we love it. And it's nice to just be able to talk about the like positive things. And I think it's mandatory if you like are gonna survive to think about the positive things and not gloss over all of the really serious stuff that's going on around food, but to hold space for both. That's the first thing. And the second thing that might be a little too big for this piece, and like I don't I'm trying to protect myself against all the like bad faith, like this girl wants you to go back to subsistence farming type interpretations of this idea. But I do seriously think that it's important to like empower people with the knowledge that they can do these things themselves if they want to, and that you don't have to be reliant on large corporations to do everything.
It's smooth sailing again for Addison. She is steadily working through her poll.
Have gotten all of my clips timestamped, and now I'm beginning to write potential VO, and I will do some scratch tape, I believe is the phrase.
Hang on. What is scratch tape? I'm actually going to let you in on a secret, dear listener. I learned about scratch tape, also known as the scratch track, at the exact same time as the interns this year. A scratch track really just refers to recording a rough draft of your voiceover directly within the DAW that you're working in. This allows you to test out potential VO scripting before setting up your blanket for or closet recording setup for your real take. What a game changer.
All of the jargon and lingo still learning, but I am doing some scratch tape to test out kind of how things sound.
After a breakthrough, Sophia was happy to report that things were looking up.
You're looking at a woman who has just completed her first script and rough cut for a Meet and 3 story. The breakthrough was honestly just like, okay, this is a 3-minute story. Like, you have room for one idea. Basically, you can either get really specific into one thing, or you can go like big picture, and that's it. If you want to do something effective in the time that you have, you got to keep it small. And that's always my problem. As I've probably said, I love biting off more than I can chew and then being like, oh no, this was a bad idea. I'll just have to start over again. I don't even know what the word for that is. It's not moderation. It's not temperance. But whatever that is, that's what I'm learning how to do.
After contemplating, grappling, and smooth sailing, Sophia, Danielle, and Addison all submitted their polls for review. Danielle reflected,
just taking this moment to give myself a little hug for accomplishing what was a little bit scary. So I think that the thing that I've realized is difficult, or the real challenge, is not only just what are you trying to say? What is the story? How does it relate to you? How can other people relate to it? And if they can't relate to it from experience, what can you share with them through the descriptions or through what you say that bring them to the table or bring them into the conversation?
The collaborative review process is an important part of the internship. During the training sprint, not only do H, Matt, Pat, and I review the interns' work, but their fellow interns do too. This allows for different points of view and consensus on what works and what may need to change in a group setting. Sometimes this review process takes place via notes and shared docs, other times in focused production meetings.
It was really cool to listen to everybody else's stories and see what narratives they chose. Everyone had kind of a different angle. Some were a little bit more personal than others. And I realized that I kind of took a very personal approach to this episode compared to some of the other submissions.
Everyone's comments were really helpful. I don't know why I'm always surprised that like what I need in order to create something is just feedback, like good or bad, even if they don't even say anything. It's just nice to like throw something at another person and see what comes back. Why am I surprised by that? That's how the creative process works. But I'm always shocked. And so I went in to look at the Google Doc comments. I was like, oh, cool. I'm like energized and excited to work on this again.
Once the final edits are done after the review process, the stories will be submitted for a final review and eventually grouped together to be turned into episodes of Meet and 3. But that is a story for another time. Stay tuned for the next episode of Behind the Internship. Our 2024 research and radio interns are right in the thick of their training sprint. They'll keep contemplating, grappling, and hopefully smooth sailing their ways through our storytelling and audio engineering training sessions and taking you along with them. You can follow along every step of the way by subscribing to Meet in 3, where you'll hear both the tales behind the internship and the stories that emerge from it. Behind the Internship is produced by Rachel Marco, engineered by Armin Spengen, and hosted by me, Taylor Early. Hi, listeners. We want to tell you about a podcast we're really digging. It's called Christopher Kimball's Milk Street Radio. Every week, they travel the world to find the most fascinating stories about food, including children who harvest cod tongues after school in Norway and a detective who tracks down food thieves. And on Milk Street Radio, you can always find the unexpected. The comedian who ranks apples using an elaborate 100-point system, the secret history of grocery stores, and how to eat your way through Italy. They also interview the most beloved names in food like Jacques Pepin, Sola El-Waylly, Jose Andres, Jet Tila, Ina Garten, Nigella Lawson, and Padma Lakshmi. Plus, co-hosts Christopher Kimball and Sarah Moulton do live calls with listeners and answer their questions about ingredients, techniques, and culinary mysteries. Like, why roasting a leg of lamb made one caller's oven explode? Ever wonder why your bread won't rise or your souffle falls flat? Chris and Sarah have the answers. You'll also hear from a rotating cast of contributors, including Kenji Lopez-Alt, Cheryl Day, Dan Pashman from The Sporkful, and Alex Ainuz, a French guy cooking from YouTube. Take a listen at 177milkstreet.com/radio or just search your podcast app for Milk Street Radio.